Whoa, 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 whoa. It's a trap. It's a trap. You gotta avoid those trap games. Let's go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. Yes, I'm a West Virginia fan, but I cover all of college football. Don't forget, guys, Golden Blue Dude does have a sponsor. It's called Tri-State Wood Sketch, and you can find them on the internet at www.tristatewoodsketch.com. He does amazing work. He can do any shape or size. All you have to do is send him the picture that you want on there. And if you mention that Golden Blue Dude sent you, he'll take 20% off. One of the things that college football fans like to talk about the most is the proverbial trap game. For me, a team has to meet two criteria for it to be a trap game. Number one, that team has to be some type of contender. Otherwise, if they're a bad team, you can't really circle any trap games for them. And that game has to be a game that you expect that team to win. I'm going to start with the SEC. And in the SEC East, I have Florida, Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky being the top four contenders in the SEC East. So I'm going to figure out what game could be their trap game. In no particular order, we'll start with Florida. Here's their schedule. They start off with FAU at USF, Alabama, Tennessee at Kentucky, Vanderbilt at LSU. Then they get a bye week. Georgia in Jacksonville, at South Carolina, Samford at Missouri, and then Florida State. I think Florida will go somewhere in the region of 8-4. I think the over-under is 9 as far as their win total. I'm going to go under and say 8-4. But the game that I'm looking at for Florida that could possibly be a trap game is that game at South Carolina. It comes right after a rivalry game against Georgia, which I think they will lose that game. And then it falls right before a gimme game against Samford, and it's on the road. I think this game meets all the criteria of a potential trap game. And this could turn Florida from an 8-4 to a 7-5, barely getting to a bowl. Next on this list, Georgia. I have Georgia going 11-1 and possibly going undefeated. I just don't trust Kirby Smart that much to go undefeated. I'm going to stick with 11-1. Georgia is loaded. Let's look at their schedule. First game right out of the gates. A neutral game against Clemson. And I think Georgia can win that game. The question is, will they? Will Kirby Smart allow Georgia to beat Clemson? After that, we have UAB, South Carolina at Vanderbilt, Arkansas at Auburn, Kentucky, then their bye week, then their rivalry game against Florida in Jacksonville, Missouri at Tennessee, Charleston Southern, and at Georgia Tech. Now, the game that I think could be their trap game is that Arkansas game. It's sandwiched between two road games, and it comes right before that road trip to Auburn. And Georgia and Auburn are rivals. Georgia will be keying in on that road game to Auburn. They don't want to trip up. Well, in doing so, they might overlook Arkansas, and it's a home game. 2 years ago, I predicted South Carolina to beat Georgia at Georgia. People called me crazy saying, no, that's not the trap game, and they tried to pick another game. Guess what happened? South Carolina beat Georgia at Georgia. This year, I'm looking at Arkansas. So you need to stay on your toes, Georgia, and Arkansas is going to be a decent team. Next in the SEC East, Missouri. I think Missouri takes a big jump forward this year. I think they go 9-3. Here's their schedule. Central Michigan at Kentucky, Southeast Missouri at Boston College, Tennessee, North Texas, Texas A&M, then their bye week, at Vanderbilt, at Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and then at Arkansas. Different team, same trap game. A home game against South Carolina. That home game against South Carolina is sandwiched between the road trip against Georgia and then the home game against Florida. So their focus might be on those two teams. I think they might take South Carolina for granted because I don't think South Carolina will be any good next year, but they will be good enough to pull off an upset. So Missouri needs to stay on their toes and not sleep on South Carolina. The last team in the SEC East, as far as a potential trap game, Kentucky. I have Kentucky going 8-4. I think Kentucky does have potential. Here's their schedule. UL Monroe, Missouri, Chattanooga, at South Carolina, Florida, LSU, at Georgia, their bye week, at Mississippi State, Tennessee, at Vanderbilt, New Mexico State, and at Louisville. Kentucky actually has a pretty decent schedule. It was actually a little difficult to find a trap game, but in my opinion, the trap game would be that road trip to Mississippi State after a bye week. Because you got to remember, before that bye week, you have that brutal road trip to Georgia. So that's the potential trap game that I see for Kentucky in 2021. Now let's jump over to the SEC West. And the 4 teams that I think will contend for the SEC West will be Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss. First, we'll start with Alabama. I actually have Alabama going 10-2. A slightly down year for Alabama this year. But don't worry, the following year, they'll be back at full strength and probably go undefeated and win the national championship. Let's look at their schedule. First game right off the bat, neutral game against Miami. This is a losable game, but I don't trust Miami enough to actually say Miami will win that game. After that, Mercer at Florida, Southern Miss, Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, Tennessee, then a bye week, LSU, New Mexico State, Arkansas, and at Auburn. I think Alabama's schedule sets up nicely as well as far as trying to find a trap game. It was difficult. I'm actually going to go with Arkansas. It comes after a gimme game against New Mexico State and before the Iron Bowl at Auburn. Like I said before, Arkansas is going to be a decent up-and-coming team, capable of pulling off some upsets. Next up, Texas A&M. I also think they go 10-2 as well. Let's look at their schedule. Kent State, at Colorado, New Mexico, then they get Arkansas in Arlington, Mississippi State, Alabama, at Missouri, South Carolina, then the bye week, Auburn, at Ole Miss, Prairie View A&M, and then at LSU. I think Texas A&M's trap game will be Auburn. They'll be coming off a bye week, and right before the bye week, a home game against South Carolina, so they might be feeling pretty good about themselves, and then right after that Auburn game at Ole Miss. They might be focused on that road trip to Oxford. So yeah, Auburn would be my trap game for Texas A&M. Next up on this list, LSU. I think they have a nice bounce back year this year. I have them going 9-3, but they could have a 10-win season. Let's look at their schedule. At UCLA, McNeese, Central Michigan, at Mississippi State, Auburn, at Kentucky, Florida, at Ole Miss, then a bye week, at Alabama, Arkansas, UL Monroe, and then Texas A&M. For the third time in this video, I'm saying Arkansas. It's just where they're placed. LSU will be coming off of 3 tough games. First, the home game against Florida, then at Ole Miss, and then at Alabama. So by then, they might be running on fumes, and Arkansas, like I've said before, has enough talent to pull off an upset. Maybe multiple upsets. We'll see. Last on this list, Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss going 9-3 as well, but they also could have a 10-win season. Here's their schedule. First game, they get Louisville in Atlanta, then Austin Peay, Tulane, then their bye week. So their bye week comes early. Then at Alabama, Arkansas, at Tennessee, LSU, at Auburn, Liberty, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and then at Mississippi State. I think LSU's trap game could be Auburn as well, because they have that LSU home game before and then the Liberty home game as well. Remember, the coach of Liberty is Hugh Freeze, who used to coach Ole Miss and had great success, so there still might be some bad blood in there. So big games against LSU and then Liberty. Then you have the road trip to Auburn, and I don't think Auburn's going to be all that great next year, so that might be Ole Miss's trap game in 2021. Let me know if you agree with me or if you think another game could be a trap game for some of these teams. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.